The champagne tasted like liquid humiliation, but I kept drinking it anyway. Standing on the glass-walled rooftop terrace of Hartwell and Associates, watching my wife Lena laugh at her boss Julian's jokes while completely ignoring my existence, I wondered when exactly I'd become invisible in my own marriage. Alex, right? The voice belonged to Vanessa King, Lena's gorgeous coworker with the kind of smile that probably got her whatever she wanted. You look like you need another drink. I glanced down at my empty glass. That obvious? Your wife's been holding court over there for 20 minutes. You've been standing here alone, looking like someone stole your lunch money. She flagged down a waiter. 2 whiskeys neat. The summer evening was perfect. 75 degrees, light breeze, city lights twinkling below us like scattered diamonds. Everyone else seemed to be having the time of their lives at this corporate celebration. Everyone except me, the underdressed husband who clearly didn't belong among these advertising executives in their $1,000 suits. So, what do you do, Alex? Vanessa asked, though her eyes kept drifting toward the crowd surrounding Lena and Julian. Finance manager at Morrison Industries. Nothing glamorous. I took a sip of whiskey. Definitely not worth mentioning at parties like this. Oh, come on, don't sell yourself short. But her tone suggested she agreed with my assessment. Across the terrace, Julian Hawke commanded attention like he was born to it. Mid-40s, 6'2", the kind of tan that came from weekend sailing trips rather than construction work. His laugh boomed across the rooftop as he gestured dramatically, telling some story that had everyone captivated, including my wife. Lena looked stunning tonight in her black cocktail dress, her auburn hair catching the string lights overhead. She'd spent 2 hours getting ready, longer than she'd spent talking to me all week. When Julian placed his hand on her lower back during his story, she didn't move away. She leaned into it. Julian's quite the charmer, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Vanessa followed my gaze. He certainly thinks so. Been divorced twice, but that doesn't stop him from thinking every woman in the office is dying to be number 3. Including married ones? She gave me a look that was part sympathy, part amusement. Especially married ones. More of a challenge, you know? The crowd around Julian erupted in laughter again. He was gesturing toward me now, and I caught fragments. Husband over there? And lucky guy. Then Julian's voice rose above the chatter. Seriously though, Lena, you're way out of his league. He doesn't deserve you. The words hit me like a physical blow, but what came next was worse. Lena laughed. Not a polite, uncomfortable laugh. A genuine, delighted laugh that said she agreed completely. Absolutely. Vanessa chimed in from across the terrace, her voice carrying clearly in the evening air. You deserve so much better, Lena. Someone more substantial. The group laughed again, and I felt my face burn. Several people glanced in my direction with barely concealed smirks. I was the joke, the inadequate husband, the punchline to their evening's entertainment. Jesus, I muttered, gripping my glass tighter. The Vanessa beside me, not the one who just humiliated me publicly, touched my arm. I'm sorry, that was uncalled for. Was it, though? I drained my whiskey. Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't deserve her. That's not what I meant. No, I get it. Look at me. I gestured to my off-the-rack suit, my department store shoes, my receding hairline. I'm a 42-year-old finance manager who drives a Honda Civic. She's a PR director who looks like she belongs in magazines. The math doesn't add up. But even as I said it, anger was building in my chest. Not the hot, explosive kind. The cold, calculating kind that came with 15 years of marriage to someone who'd slowly, systematically made me feel smaller and smaller. I should go, I said. Alex, wait. But I was already walking toward the exit, past the clusters of beautiful people who barely registered my existence. I needed air that didn't smell like expensive perfume and casual cruelty. The stairwell was blessedly empty and quiet. I pulled out my phone to call an Uber, but voices from below made me freeze. Can't believe you said that. Lena's voice, but lower, more intimate than her public persona. What? It's true. Julian's voice, confident and amused. The guy's a walking advertisement for mediocrity. What do you see in him? I don't know anymore. My wife's voice was soft, almost sad. He used to be different, funnier, more confident. Now he just exists. Goes to work, comes home, watches TV, goes to bed. He barely counts as a man anymore. The words hit me like ice water. I pressed myself against the wall, hidden in the shadows of the stairwell landing. You deserve passion, Lena. Adventure. Someone who appreciates what he has. Julian's voice was closer now, more intimate. Someone who knows how to treat a woman like you. Julian. I'm serious. Life's too short to waste it on someone who doesn't see how incredible you are. I heard movement, shuffling, the soft sound of fabric against fabric. Then silence. When I finally heard their footsteps moving away, separately, heading to different floors, I stood there in the stairwell for another 10 minutes, my hands shaking with rage. Not at being cheated on. I'd suspected that for months. At being dismissed, diminished, turned into nothing more than a convenient joke at a rooftop party. But as I finally walked down those stairs and out into the night air, one thought kept echoing in my mind. They had no idea who they were dealing with. None of them did. I wasn't just the mediocre husband anymore. I was the mediocre husband with nothing left to lose. The next morning I woke up alone. Lena's side of the bed was cold, and I could hear the shower running in our master bathroom. She'd come home sometime after 2 a.m., slipping into bed like a ghost. I'd pretended to be asleep. Our townhouse in Riverside Heights was supposed to be our dream home. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, granite countertops, and a mortgage that would take us 30 years to pay off. Now it felt like a museum of a marriage that had died somewhere along the way. Morning, Lena said, emerging from the bathroom in her silk robe, hair wrapped in a towel. She moved through our bedroom like I wasn't there, selecting clothes from her walk-in closet with the same attention she'd give to choosing produce at the grocery store. How was the rest of the party? I asked, sitting up in bed. Fine. You left early. No apology, no explanation, just a statement of fact. Yeah, I had a headache. I watched her step into her designer underwear, the same black lace set she used to wear for me. Julian seemed to be enjoying himself. She paused for just a fraction of a second before pulling on her stockings. He always does. He's very social. Social, that's one word for it. Now she looked at me, her green eyes sharp. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just an observation. I got out of bed, heading for my own closet. My section was about a quarter the size of hers. I'm going to grab coffee with Derek before work. Fine. She was already back to getting dressed, dismissing me again. Derek Martinez had been my friend since college, back when I was funnier and more confident, according to my wife's assessment. He owned O'Malley's, a dive bar downtown that served the best coffee in the city and attracted everyone from construction workers to off-duty cops to advertising executives looking to slum it. I found him behind the bar at 8 a.m., polishing glasses and setting up for the day. You look like hell, he said by way of greeting. Derek was built like a linebacker gone soft, with graying temples and forearms covered in tattoos from his punk rock days. Let me guess, Lena's work party. How'd you know? Because you get that same expression every time you come back from one of her corporate things, like someone ran over your dog. He poured me coffee in a mug that had seen better decades. What happened this time? I told him about the rooftop, Julian's comments, Lena's laughter, the overheard conversation in the stairwell. Derek listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or grimacing. So what are you going to do? He asked when I finished. I don't know. Confront her? Get a divorce lawyer? Pretend it never happened? Or you could find out exactly what's going on first. Derek leaned across the bar. Look, man, I've been watching marriages implode in this place for 15 years. The ones who just react emotionally, they get destroyed in divorce court. The ones who gather information first, they have options. You're suggesting I spy on my own wife? I'm suggesting you stop being naive. If she's cheating, you need proof. If she's not, you need to know that too. Either way, you need facts, not suspicions. He had a point. I'd been operating on gut feelings and overheard conversations. In my line of work, I'd never make a financial decision based on such thin evidence. How would I even do that? Derek grinned. Leave that to me. I know people. 2 hours later, I was sitting in my gray cubicle at Morrison Industries, staring at spreadsheets and thinking about my conversation with Derek. My job was steady but uninspiring, analyzing budget reports and making recommendations that senior management usually ignored. The kind of middle management position that paid the bills, but would never make anyone rich or famous. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Meet me at your wife's office building at lunch. Bring your ID. Hartwell and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of the Meridian building downtown. Glass and steel, all sharp angles and modern art in the lobby. I'd been there exactly twice in the 5 years Lena had worked there, once for her promotion party, once for last night's disaster. Derek was waiting outside, but he wasn't alone. Next to him stood a mountain of a man in a security uniform. Alex, meet Big Joe. Joe, this is the guy I was telling you about. Big Joe had to be 6'6" and built like a refrigerator. But when he smiled, his whole face transformed into something gentle and kind. Derek says your wife works upstairs, Joe said in a surprisingly soft voice. Says you might need to get into her office. I don't want to break any laws. Nothing illegal about visiting your wife at work, Derek interrupted. Joe here just happens to know the building's security schedule, and lunch hour is always the lightest staffed. Why would you help me? I asked Joe. His expression darkened slightly. Because I got a wife too, and if some slick corporate type was sniffing around her, I'd want to know about it. He handed me a temporary visitor's badge. This gets you to the 23rd floor, Hartwell and Associates. Your wife's office is 23C according to the directory. How do you know? I pay attention, Joe said simply. 32nd floor is executive level. That's where the boss man works, Julian Hawk. He's been taking a lot of lunch meetings on 23 lately, if you catch my meaning. My stomach dropped. How often? 3, 4 times a week for the past month. Always around noon. Always stays about an hour. Joe's expression was sympathetic but firm. Look, man, I don't know what's going on up there, but I know patterns, and this ain't no normal business pattern. Derek clapped me on the shoulder. You don't have to do anything with the information, but at least you'll know. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor felt like it took forever. My hands were sweating, and I kept checking the visitor's badge to make sure it was still clipped to my jacket. What was I going to say if someone saw me? What was I going to do if I actually found something? The Hartwell and Associates reception area was all white leather and chrome, with abstract paintings that probably cost more than my car. The receptionist was at lunch, her desk empty except for a half-eaten salad and a romance novel. Office 23C had Lena's name on a brass nameplate. The door was closed but not locked. I stood there for 30 seconds, listening for voices inside. Nothing. I pushed the door open. Lena's office was exactly what I'd expected. Sleek, organized, everything in its place. Her computer was locked, but her phone was sitting on the desk, plugged into a charger. An iPhone in a rose gold case that I'd given her for Christmas 2 years ago. My heart was pounding as I picked it up. The lock screen showed several text notifications, but I couldn't read them without her passcode. I tried her birthday. Nothing. Our anniversary. Nothing. My birthday. The phone unlocked. The most recent messages were from a contact listed simply as J. J. Lunch was incredible. You're incredible. Lena. We have to be more careful. Jay. Why? Afraid your roommate will find out? Lena. He's my husband, not my roommate. Jay. Could have fooled me. When's the last time he made you feel the way I do? Lena. That's not fair. Jay. Fair? What's not fair is wasting yourself on someone who doesn't appreciate you. You deserve to be worshipped, not ignored. There were dozens more messages, going back weeks. Nothing explicitly sexual, but the intimacy was obvious. Pet names, inside jokes, references to shared experiences that didn't include me. But it was the most recent exchange, from this morning, that made my blood run cold. Jay. Dinner tonight? I know a place where we won't run into anyone from the office. Lena. I can't. Alex is already suspicious. Jay. So what if he is? What's he going to do about it? File a complaint with HR. Lena. You don't know him like I do. Jay. I know he's weak. I know he lets you walk all over him. I know he's never going to give you the life you deserve. Lena. Maybe you're right. Jay. I'm always right. That's why you're falling for me. Lena. Who says I'm falling? Jay. Your body language last night. The way you looked at me during my speech. The way you didn't pull away when I touched you. Lena. Someone could have seen. Jay. Let them. I'm not ashamed of wanting you. Are you ashamed of wanting me? The conversation ended there, but I'd seen enough. I took photos of the key messages with my own phone, then put Lena's phone back exactly where I'd found it. As I was leaving her office, I nearly collided with someone in the hallway. Oh, I'm sorry, The woman stopped mid-sentence when she saw me. You're Alex, right? Lena's husband? I recognized her from the party. Kira, Julian's assistant. Early 30s, professionally dressed, with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. That's right. I was just visiting Lena, but she wasn't in. She's at lunch. Kira's expression was carefully neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. With Mr. Hawk, they have a lot of client meetings lately. The way she said client meetings made it clear she knew exactly what was going on. I should go, I said. Alex? Kira's voice stopped me. For what it's worth, I think she's making a mistake. I looked back at her, surprised by the comment. Mr. Hawk isn't... He's not a good man. He goes through assistants like tissues, treats people like they're disposable. She adjusted her glasses nervously. Your wife seems nice. She deserves better than to be another notch on his belt. Why are you telling me this? Because someone should, and because I've seen what he does to women who think they're special to him. Kira's voice was quiet but firm. He's done this before, multiple times. It never ends well for them. As I rode the elevator back down to the lobby, Kira's words echoed in my mind. Julian had done this before, multiple times, which meant Lena wasn't special to him. She was just convenient. But that also meant he had a pattern, and patterns could be predicted. More importantly, they could be exploited. When I got back to O'Malley's, Derek took one look at my face and poured me a whiskey. That bad? Worse. I showed him the photos I'd taken of the text messages. He read them with increasing disgust. Roommate? The guy called you a roommate? That's not even the worst part. According to his assistant, this is Julian's standard operating procedure. He targets married women in the office, makes them feel special, then moves on to the next one. Derek set down his phone and looked at me seriously. So what are you going to do? I stared at the whiskey in my glass, thinking about Lena's laugh on the rooftop, about Julian's hand on her back, about 15 years of marriage being dismissed as a roommate situation. I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve, I said finally. But first, I need to know everything, every detail, every secret, every weakness. Derek grinned. Now you're talking. What do you need? Information. About Julian, about the company, about everyone who was at that party last night. I met his eyes. And I need to know who else knows about the affair, because if I'm going to destroy them, I want an audience. Consider it done. But Alex? Derek's expression grew serious. Once you start down this road, there's no going back. You sure you want to do this? I thought about Lena getting dressed this morning, dismissing me like furniture. About Julian's arrogant assumption that I was too weak to fight back. About being turned into a punchline at my own wife's work party. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The next morning brought rain and revelation. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat in our kitchen watching the water streak down the windows while Lena slept in. She'd come home late again, claiming she'd been out with girlfriends from work. The lie came so easily I almost admired her technique. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Meet me at the usual spot. Brought reinforcements. O'Malley's at 7 a.m. was a different world than the evening crowd. A handful of regulars nursed coffee and read newspapers, creating a quiet sanctuary before the day's chaos began. Derek was in his usual spot behind the bar, but he wasn't alone. Sitting at the bar was a woman I recognized from the rooftop party, Vanessa King. The same Vanessa who'd publicly agreed that I didn't deserve my wife, though she looked considerably less polished at 7 in the morning than she had under the string lights. Before you say anything, she said without looking up from her coffee, I know what you're thinking, and you're right. I was a bitch the other night. I slid onto the bar stool next to her. So why are you here? Because Derek told me what you found on Lena's phone. And because I have information you need. She finally looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't noticed at the party. Intelligence. Sharp, calculating intelligence. Also, because I hate Julian Hawke more than you can possibly imagine. Derek poured me coffee. Vanessa has some interesting insights about your wife's boyfriend. He's not just cheating with Lena, Vanessa said without preamble. She's the third married woman from the office in 2 years. Before her, it was Rebecca Chen from accounting. Before Rebecca, it was Sarah Morrison from creative. What happened to them? Rebecca got divorced, lost custody of her kids because Julian's wife hired a private investigator and documented everything. Sarah got fired when Julian got bored and claimed she was sexually harassing him. Vanessa's voice was bitter. HR believed him, of course. They always do. And you know this how? Because I've been documenting Julian's behavior for 18 months. Every inappropriate comment, every affair, every woman he's destroyed. She pulled out her phone and showed me a folder labeled insurance. I was planning to use it to get him fired, but then I realized something better. Which is? Getting him fired just moves the problem somewhere else. But destroying his reputation? Making him unemployable in this industry? That's permanent. She smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. Plus, your wife isn't exactly an innocent victim here. She knew about Rebecca and Sarah. I told her myself, warned her to stay away from Julian. She laughed and said she could handle him. The betrayal hit deeper than I'd expected. Lena hadn't just stumbled into an affair. She'd walked into it with full knowledge of what Julian was capable of. So what are you proposing? I asked. An alliance. You want revenge on both of them. I want Julian's career destroyed and Lena's reputation in ruins. Derek wants to help because he's a good friend, and he hates seeing you get walked on. Vanessa leaned forward. Together, we can give them exactly what they deserve. Derek nodded. I've already started making calls. You'd be surprised how many people in this city have stories about Julian Hawke. Guy's made a lot of enemies over the years. What kind of stories? Sexual harassment, workplace bullying, fraudulent expense reports, nothing anyone could prove individually but together? Derek grinned. Let's just say the pattern becomes pretty clear. I thought about it while I sipped my coffee. 3 days ago, I'd been a mediocre husband trying to save a failing marriage. Now I was planning to destroy 2 people's lives with the help of a bartender and a woman who'd publicly humiliated me. What's the plan? Vanessa's smile was sharp as a blade. We're going to give them enough rope to hang themselves. But first, we need more evidence. And we need to make sure when they fall, everyone's watching. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Vanessa would continue to document Julian's behavior while feeding him information designed to make him overconfident. Derek would work his network of contacts to spread carefully chosen rumors about Julian's business practices, and I would play the role of the oblivious husband while gathering evidence of the affair. "There's a company retreat next weekend," Vanessa explained. 3 days at the Lakewood Resort, about 2 hours north of here. Julian's already arranged for Lena to be his assistant for the weekend, even though she's not his assistant. Let me guess, separate rooms that happen to be next to each other? Adjoining rooms? He's not even trying to be subtle anymore. Vanessa pulled up the reservation details on her phone. But here's the interesting part. Julian's wife thinks he's going to be at a different conference entirely, in Chicago. How do you know that? Because I'm the one who books his travel, and I'm very good at keeping detailed records of where he's supposed to be versus where he actually is. Derek leaned across the bar. So what happens if Julian's wife gets an anonymous tip about where her husband really is that weekend? That would be unfortunate for Julian, Vanessa said with mock sympathy. Especially if someone happened to be there with a camera when she shows up. I stared at both of them. You're talking about destroying their lives. No, Vanessa corrected. We're talking about letting them destroy their own lives. We're just making sure there are consequences this time. The moral implications should have bothered me more than they did. But every time I started to feel guilty, I remembered Lena's laugh on the rooftop, Julian's casual dismissal of me as a roommate, 15 years of marriage reduced to a punchline. I'm in, I said finally. But I want to be the one who confronts them when it all comes apart. I want to see their faces when they realize what they've lost. Deal, Vanessa said, extending her hand. Welcome to the revenge business, Alex. As I shook her hand, I felt something shift inside me. The mediocre husband was disappearing, replaced by someone harder. Someone who'd been pushed too far and was finally ready to push back. One more thing, I said. When this is over, I want them to know it was me. I don't want to hide behind anonymous tips and mysterious evidence. I want them to know that the weak, mediocre roommate they dismissed so easily was the one who brought them down. Derek and Vanessa exchanged a look. That's risky, Vanessa warned. It means you can't claim innocent victim status in the divorce. I don't want innocent victim status. I want them to understand that actions have consequences, and that underestimating someone is the fastest way to give them power over you. In that case, Derek said, raising his coffee mug, here's to giving them exactly what they deserve. We clinked mugs like we were toasting a business deal instead of planning the systematic destruction of two people's lives. And for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The Lakewood Resort was the kind of place that appeared in luxury travel magazines, rustic elegance nestled among towering pines, with a lake that reflected the mountains like a mirror. Under different circumstances, it might have been romantic. Instead, it felt like a stage set for the final act of my marriage. I'd driven up Friday afternoon, checking into a cabin about a mile from the main resort under a false name Derek had helped me establish. Vanessa had provided Julian and Lena's itinerary, and I'd spent the evening positioning cameras in strategic locations around the resort grounds. Nothing illegal. All public areas, all places where anyone could take photos. Saturday morning, I watched through binoculars as Julian and Lena had breakfast on the resort's main terrace. They sat close together, his hand covering hers on the table, her head thrown back in laughter at something he'd said. To anyone watching, they looked like lovers on a romantic getaway, which, of course, they were. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Package delivered, ETA 2 hours. The package was information delivered to Julian's wife, Margaret, about her husband's real location this weekend, along with photographs of Julian and Lena entering the resort together, booking adjoining rooms, and generally behaving like anything but professional colleagues. Derek had done his homework on Margaret Hawk, 52 years old, former prosecutor turned high-powered divorce attorney. The kind of woman who didn't just get mad, she got even, and she got everything. At noon, I positioned myself in the resort's main lobby with a clear view of the elevators and the entrance. Julian and Lena were supposed to be in a strategy session in his room, according to the schedule Vanessa had provided. At 12:47 p.m., Margaret Hawk walked through the resort's front doors like an avenging angel in a designer suit. She was tall, silver-haired, and moved with the kind of confidence that came from winning battles in courtrooms for 30 years. The desk clerk took one look at her expression and immediately became very helpful when she asked for her husband's room number. I followed at a discreet distance as she took the elevator to the third floor. Room 312, Julian's suite. I positioned myself around the corner in the hallway, close enough to hear, but far enough away to avoid being seen. Margaret's knock was sharp and authoritative. "Julian, open the door." Silence, then frantic whispering from inside the room. "Julian Hawk, I know you're in there. I also know you're not alone. You have 30 seconds to open this door before I have hotel security open it for me." More whispering, the sound of rapid movement. Then the door opened. "Margaret, what are you doing here?" Julian's voice was strained, trying for casual surprise and failing miserably. "I could ask you the same question. Weren't you supposed to be in Chicago at a medical device conference?" Her voice was ice-cold professional. "Funny thing. I called the Palmer House to surprise you with dinner reservations. They've never heard of you." "I can explain." "I'm sure you can. You always could spin a good story." There was a pause. "Hello, Lena. You look lovely. Is that a new robe?" Even from around the corner, I could hear Lena's sharp intake of breath. "Margaret, this isn't what it looks like," Julian tried. "Really? Because it looks like you're having an affair with your employee in a hotel room while lying to your wife about your whereabouts. But please, tell me what it actually is." The silence stretched for several seconds. "I want a divorce," Margaret said finally, her voice perfectly calm. "I want half of everything. I want the house in Westchester. I want alimony. And I want you to understand that I will use every contact I have in this industry to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are." "Margaret, please." 23 years of marriage, Julian. 23 years of looking the other way while you screwed your secretaries and assistants and anyone else stupid enough to fall for your act. But this time, you made a mistake. "What mistake?" "You picked someone married to a man who's smarter than you gave him credit for." My blood went cold. She knew. Somehow, Margaret Hawk knew I was involved. "What are you talking about?" Julian's voice was confused. "The photographs, Julian. The detailed timeline of your affair. The documentation of your lies about this weekend. You think that just appeared out of nowhere?" Margaret's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Someone's been watching you. Someone's been planning this. And frankly, I'm impressed." There was a long pause. "Alex." Lena's voice was barely a whisper. "Smart girl," Margaret said. "Not smart enough to avoid sleeping with my husband, but smart enough to figure out who orchestrated your downfall." "That's impossible," Julian said. He's nobody. He's weak. Weak men don't plan elaborate revenge schemes, Julian. Weak men don't gather evidence and build cases and coordinate with multiple people to destroy their enemies." Margaret's voice was almost admiring. "You underestimated him. Both of you did. And now you're going to pay for it." I heard footsteps moving toward the door. "I'll be in touch through my attorney," Margaret said. "Julian, pack your things. You're not welcome in our house anymore. Lena, I'd suggest you call your husband. You're going to need all the goodwill you can get." The door slammed shut. I waited 30 seconds, then walked calmly down the hallway past Julian's room. I could hear raised voices inside, Julian and Lena arguing in harsh whispers. But I didn't stop to listen. I had what I came for. Back in my cabin, I reviewed the audio recordings from the cameras I'd placed around the resort. Crystal clear documentation of Julian and Lena's romantic weekend, their intimate conversations, their complete lack of discretion. But more importantly, I had Margaret Hawke's public acknowledgement that I was the architect of their destruction. Word would spread through their professional circles within hours. Everyone would know that the weak, mediocre husband had orchestrated the downfall of the powerful CEO and his mistress. My phone rang. Lena. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, and again. Finally, I answered. Alex? Alex, we need to talk. Her voice was shaking. Do we? I thought I was just your roommate. Silence. How long have you known? She asked finally. Does it matter? The question is, what are you going to do now? I'm coming home. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can... No, Lena, we can't. I walked to the cabin's window, looking out at the lake. You made your choice. You chose Julian. You chose to humiliate me in public. You chose to lie to me for months. Now, you get to live with the consequences. Alex, please. I made a mistake. Julian doesn't mean anything to me. He meant enough for you to risk our marriage. He meant enough for you to laugh when he said I didn't deserve you. I paused. But you were right about one thing. What? I don't deserve you. I deserve better. I deserve someone who doesn't treat me like furniture. Someone who doesn't cheat and lie and turn me into a joke at office parties. I never meant... Yes, you did. You meant every word, every laugh, every dismissive comment. Every night you came home late smelling like his cologne. My voice was getting colder. But here's what you didn't mean to do. You didn't mean to underestimate me. That was your fatal mistake. What are you going to do? I'm going to give you exactly what you deserve, both of you. I hung up. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts. Julian, Lena, even Vanessa wanting updates. I ignored them all. Instead, I sat on the cabin's porch, drinking whiskey and watching the sun set over the lake. Tomorrow, I would drive back to the city and begin the final phase of my plan. But tonight, I wanted to savor this moment. The moment when the weak, mediocre roommate had become the puppet master, pulling all the strings. The moment when I'd stopped being the victim and become the villain. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, utterly alive. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything seem possible. I dressed carefully. My best suit, the one I'd worn to our wedding 15 years ago. It still fit, though I'd had to have it altered twice over the years. Today felt like the kind of day that deserved ceremony. Lena was gone when I woke up. Her car wasn't in the driveway, and none of her usual morning routine items were in the bathroom. She'd either left very early or hadn't come home at all. I found a note on the kitchen counter written in her precise handwriting. Staying at my sister's. We need space to think. Space to think. After months of lying and cheating, now she wanted space to think. I crumpled the note and threw it away. My first stop was the office. Morrison Industries occupied a modest building in the financial district, nothing like the glass and steel monument where Lena worked, but solid and respectable. I'd been there for 8 years, working my way up from junior analyst to finance manager. Not glamorous, but steady. Alex, my supervisor, Janet Morrison, looked surprised to see me in her doorway. I thought you were taking a personal day. Change of plans. I need to talk to you about something. Janet was in her mid-50s, a no-nonsense woman who'd built the company's finance department from scratch. She'd always been fair with me, and I respected her judgment. I'm getting divorced, I said without preamble. It's going to be messy, and there might be some publicity. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Her expression shifted to concern. I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything the company can do to support you? Actually, there is. I pulled out an envelope I'd prepared. I'm requesting a temporary leave of absence, 2 weeks, unpaid. I have some personal matters to resolve, and I want to make sure they don't interfere with my work here." Janet opened the envelope and scanned the formal request letter. "This is very professional, Alex. Most people just call in sick when their personal lives implode." She looked up at me. "Are you okay? You seem different." "I'm better than I've been in years," I said honestly. "I'm finally dealing with problems instead of ignoring them." "Well, your request is approved. Take care of yourself and let me know if you need anything." My second stop was the bank. I'd spent the weekend reviewing our joint finances, and what I'd found was illuminating. Lena had been siphoning money from our joint savings account for months. Small amounts, but consistent. Probably funding her affair. Expensive dinners, hotel rooms, gifts for Julian. I closed our joint accounts and opened new ones in my name only. Legally, I was entitled to half of everything, and I took exactly that. No more, no less. But I also made sure Lena's credit cards, the ones tied to my accounts, were immediately canceled. By 10 a.m., she'd called me 6 times. I didn't answer. My third stop was Derek's bar. Even though it was early, the place was busy with the breakfast crowd, construction workers, night shift employees heading home, and a few people who just needed somewhere to think. Derek took one look at me and poured coffee without being asked. "You look like a man with a plan," he said. "Phase 1 is complete. Julian's wife knows everything. Their marriage is over, and word is already spreading through their professional circles." I sipped the coffee. "Phase 2 begins today." "Which is?" "Lena comes home to find her credit cards canceled, her access to our joint accounts terminated, and divorce papers waiting for her." I pulled out a manila envelope. "I had them drawn up over the weekend." Derek whistled low. "You don't mess around." "I'm done messing around. I've been the nice guy for 15 years, the understanding husband, the one who compromised and accommodated and made excuses for her behavior." I met his eyes. "That man is gone." "What about Julian?" "Julian's career is finished. His wife will make sure of that. But I want him to understand that I'm the reason his life fell apart." I smiled, and it felt sharp. I want him to know that the weak roommate he dismissed so easily was the one who destroyed everything he cared about. Derek leaned across the bar. "And how are you going to do that?" "I'm going to tell him. Today. In front of everyone who matters." At noon, I walked into the lobby of the Meridian building. Big Joe was at the security desk, and he nodded when he saw me. "Heard you had an interesting weekend," he said quietly. "News travels fast." "In this building?" "Hell yes. Julian Hawk's been getting calls all morning. Angry calls. His wife's attorney, the company's board of directors, several clients who don't appreciate being lied to about conference attendance." Joe grinned. "Man looks like he aged 10 years since Friday." "Is he in his office?" 30th floor. "But Alex?" Joe's expression grew serious. "Security cameras cover that whole floor. Whatever you're planning to do, make sure it's legal." "Don't worry. I'm not going to touch him. I don't need to." The elevator ride to the 30th floor felt like ascending to a different world, executive territory, where the carpets were thicker and the art was real, and everything whispered expensive success. Julian's office was at the end of the hall, behind double doors marked with his name and title. His secretary's desk was empty, but I could hear voices from inside his office. I knocked once and walked in without waiting for permission. Julian was behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear, his face red with anger or embarrassment. Across from him sat 2 men in expensive suits who looked like lawyers or board members. "I'll call you back," Julian said into the phone, his eyes locked on me. "Gentlemen," I said to the 2 visitors, "I'm Alex Mercer. Julian's been sleeping with my wife." The silence in the room was absolute. Julian slowly hung up the phone. "Alex, what are you doing here?" "I came to thank you," I said, settling into the chair next to the 2 men. "You've done me an enormous favor." "I don't understand." You helped me realize that my marriage was over. You helped me understand that my wife doesn't respect me. Most importantly, you helped me discover that I'm much stronger than either of you thought." I smiled at him. "So, thank you." One of the suited men cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting?" "No, please stay," I said. "I think you should hear this. Julian, would you like to tell them about your weekend at the Lakewood Resort? Or should I?" Julian's face went pale. "Alex, I think you should leave." "I don't think so. See, for months I've been the weak husband, the mediocre roommate who didn't deserve his beautiful wife, the punchline to your jokes at office parties." I leaned forward. "But it turns out that weak men don't plan elaborate revenge schemes. They don't coordinate with multiple people to destroy their enemies. They don't systematically gather evidence and build cases that destroy marriages and careers." "What are you talking about?" But Julian's voice was shaking now. "I'm talking about the fact that your wife has filed for divorce and is demanding half of everything you own. I'm talking about the fact that the company's board has been informed about your affair with a subordinate. I'm talking about the fact that every client you lied to about your whereabouts this weekend is now questioning their relationship with this firm." The two men were listening intently now, their expressions growing darker. "I'm talking about the fact that you underestimated the wrong person, Julian. You thought I was weak because I didn't fight back when you humiliated me. But I wasn't weak. I was planning. Every insult, every dismissive comment, every time you put your hands on my wife in public, I was building a case against you." Julian stood up abruptly. "Get out of my office." "Your office?" I laughed. "Julian, by the end of the week, you won't have an office. You'll be lucky if you have a job. Do you really think the board is going to keep a CEO who lies to clients and sleeps with married employees?" I turned to the two men, who I now realized were definitely board members based on their expressions. "Gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting your meeting, but I thought you should know that Julian's personal conduct has been problematic. If you'd like documentation of his affair with my wife, including photographs from this weekend and text messages going back months, I'd be happy to provide them." "That won't be necessary," one of them said quietly. "We have all the information we need." I stood up and straightened my jacket. "Julian, it's been educational. I've learned that I'm much stronger than I thought, and you're much weaker than you pretended to be. I've learned that actions have consequences, and that underestimating someone is the fastest way to give them power over you. Alex. Oh, and one more thing." I paused at the door. "Lena will be looking for a job soon. Her position here is going to become untenable once word spreads about her affair with her boss. You might want to give her some career advice, though given how your career is going, maybe not." I walked out of Julian's office and closed the door behind me. Through the glass, I could see him slumping into his chair while the two board members leaned forward, their expressions grim. In the elevator, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete satisfaction. Not happiness exactly, but the deep contentment that came from seeing justice served. My phone buzzed with a text from Lena. "Please call me. We need to talk." I deleted it without responding. By the time I reached the lobby, I could hear raised voices from the 30th floor. Julian's career was ending in real time, and I was the one who'd orchestrated its destruction. Big Joe looked up as I passed his desk. "How'd it go?" "Exactly as planned." "Good for you, man. Some people need to learn that actions have consequences." The city kept moving around me as if nothing had happened, as if an executive hadn't just been cornered by his own arrogance, and a woman hadn't torched her marriage for the thrill of feeling chosen. And I let that normal rhythm wash over me because it reminded me that the world didn't end when someone betrayed you. It simply rearranged itself and waited to see whether you would stand up or fold. I stopped at a crosswalk and watched the light change, watched a cluster of strangers step forward with the casual confidence of people who still trusted the ground beneath their feet. And I realized I wanted that again, Not naivety, not blind optimism, but the quiet certainty that my life was mine to steer. My hands were steady in my coat pockets, but my mind still replayed flashes from Julian's office, the boardroom hush, the way a lie can collapse when everyone sees the same document at the same time. And the realization didn't make me proud so much as it made me calm, the way you feel after finally pulling a splinter out of your skin. I found a small cafe tucked between two towers, warm light spilling onto the sidewalk, and I went inside because I wanted something simple, something ordinary, something that had nothing to do with lawyers or HR or whispered rumors. The barista took my order like it was the only thing that mattered in the world, and I appreciated the innocence of that transaction. The clean exchange of money for a cup of coffee, no hidden motives, no leverage, no scoreboard. I sat by the window and watched people pass, and I let my thoughts arrange themselves into a list. Because lists were something I could control, and control was the medicine I'd been overdosing on for weeks. Finalize the divorce. Sign the paperwork without shaking. Make sure the bank accounts were separated properly. Change the beneficiaries. Update the insurance. Schedule the moving company. Return the keys. Close the joint credit card. Make a clean cut, not the kind that bleeds slowly for months. I pulled out my phone and opened the checklist I'd started days ago, adding items with the same precision I'd used to gather evidence, and I felt something almost like relief when I saw how long the list was, because a long list meant momentum, and momentum meant the future wasn't a fog, it was a sequence. When I finished my coffee, I stepped back outside, and the sun was lower now, light slanting between buildings like it was searching for the sharpest edges, and my phone buzzed again, this time with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, because part of me was tired of being reachable, but I answered anyway, because I'd learned that the moment you stop paying attention is the moment someone else decides your story for you. "Alex," a man's voice said, careful and professional, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who chose his words the way surgeons chose their tools. "This is Martin Keller, corporate counsel for the company. Do you have a minute?" I didn't ask how he got my number, because I knew, and I didn't ask what he wanted, because I could already feel the shape of it. "I have a minute," I said. "I'll be direct," he replied, and I heard papers shifting, the soft clink of a pen against glass. "The board is meeting today, and what you presented is significant. There's going to be an investigation. There may be regulatory inquiries. There may be litigation, depending on what else comes to light. You understand that, yes?" "I understand," I said, and I looked at my reflection in a dark window, the faint outline of my own face superimposed on the city behind it, as if I was half ghost, half man. "There's also a personal component," Keller continued. "I'm aware that the individual involved is your spouse. That makes this delicate." "Delicate for who?" I asked, and my voice sounded flatter than I expected, like I'd already walked past the emotional part of this and was now standing in the administrative aftermath. "For everyone," he said, which was lawyer code for the company. "And because of that, I'm advising you to refrain from discussing this with anyone, including employees, including friends in the building. No statements, no social posts, no interviews. If media reaches out, refer them to corporate communications." I let the instruction hang there, and I could tell he was waiting for agreement, for obedience, for the old version of me that would have nodded and thanked him for the guidance. "I didn't leak anything," I said. "I did my part. I brought it to the people who could act on it." "And that's appreciated," Keller replied quickly, as if he wanted to keep the conversation smooth. "But now, you need to let process work." Process. The word tasted like the rooms I'd sat in for years, watching Julian's kind of men use process as a weapon, burying complaints under procedure until the person who spoke up gave up, and I felt a spike of something sharp in my chest. "I will," I said, because there was no point arguing with him, not on the phone, not in public, not when the real battle was already won. But I'm not going to protect anyone. There was a pause, barely a second, but it was enough to tell me he'd heard the steal. "No one is asking you to protect anyone," he said carefully. "We're asking you to protect yourself, and frankly, protect the integrity of what you've done." When the call ended, I stood still on the sidewalk and watched a cyclist weave through traffic, and I understood what Keller didn't say out loud, that powerful people don't just fall, they flail on the way down, and Julian would have allies, and allies always tried to rewrite the narrative into something cleaner than the truth. I wasn't surprised when my phone buzzed again a few minutes later, a text this time, and the name that lit up the screen made my stomach go tight. Lena. 2 words, no punctuation, like she was out of breath. "Where are you?" I stared at it, letting the silence stretch, and I could almost picture her fingers hovering over the keyboard, that familiar impatience, that assumption that I existed to respond on her timetable. I didn't answer. I kept walking, because the city had taught me something in the last hour, that movement is a kind of statement, and I wanted my statement to be forward. The next text came before I reached the next block. "Please talk to me." I stopped under the shadow of a building and leaned against the cold stone, and I felt the old tug for a heartbeat, the reflex to smooth things over, to salvage, to make the discomfort stop, and then I remembered the rooftop laugh, the dismissive tilt of her head, the way she'd turned our marriage into a joke she could tell for attention. Sympathy tried to rise again, softer this time, but I pressed it down with the truth. I typed one message, slow and deliberate. "Contact my attorney. Do not contact me." I hit send, then immediately blocked the number because I knew how she operated, how she could turn a conversation into a trap, how she could twist my words into a plea, and I wasn't going to give her that. The air felt colder after that, or maybe it was just the realization that the last thread had been cut, and there was nothing left to negotiate. I walked until I found a small park and sat on a bench under a tree that had already started dropping leaves like it was shedding something heavy, and I looked at the bare branches and thought about the first time I'd met Lena, how she'd leaned close and made me feel like I was the only person in the room, how I'd mistaken intensity for love, and how I'd spent years shrinking myself so she could feel tall. My life had been a long apology for not being enough, and I didn't even remember when I'd started saying sorry for things that weren't my fault. A gust of wind rattled the leaves at my feet, and my phone buzzed once more. This time a notification from my email, a new message from Vanessa with the subject line simply, FYI. I opened it, and my eyes narrowed as I read the first sentence. Julian's team is trying to frame this as retaliation by a disgruntled spouse. Of course they were, because that story was neat, and it made me small, and it turned what I'd done into an emotional tantrum instead of a documented exposure. Vanessa had attached a screenshot of an internal memo draft, language carefully crafted to suggest I'd acted out of personal spite, that the evidence was misinterpreted, that context was missing. And there it was again, the old playbook, the one that made truth sound like rumor. I stared at the screen until my fingers stopped feeling cold, and a different kind of calm settled into my bones, sharper and more focused than before. They weren't just falling, they were trying to drag me down with them. I exhaled slowly, then opened my notes app and created a new list beneath the old one, a list that wasn't about logistics or paperwork, but about strategy. Document the smear attempt. Save the memo. Identify who authored it. Preserve chain of custody. Notify counsel. Prepare a statement, if necessary, that sticks to verified facts and dates. Make sure the record shows I acted through proper channels before anything went public. Make sure the narrative can't be rewritten. I looked up at the skyline, at the glass towers that reflected sunlight like polished armor, and I understood something with startling clarity. I hadn't brought down 2 untouchable people. I'd simply forced them to show their hands, and now I could finally see the game they'd been playing all along. 3 days later, Lena came home. I was sitting in our living room, reading a book and drinking coffee, when I heard her key in the front door. She entered quietly, almost tentatively, like she wasn't sure she was welcome in her own house. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her clothes were wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her eyes. The confident, polished woman who'd laughed at Julian's jokes while dismissing her husband was gone, replaced by someone who looked lost and defeated. "Alex?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Hello, Lena." I didn't look up from my book. "We need to talk." "Do we? I thought we covered everything pretty thoroughly over the weekend." She moved into the living room, but didn't sit down. "I lost my job. I heard. Julian's been fired too. His wife is taking him for everything." "Good. Alex, please look at me." I closed my book and looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd married 15 years ago. The woman I'd loved more than my own life. The woman who'd systematically destroyed our marriage while making me feel like it was my fault. "What do you want, Lena?" "I want to apologize. I want to explain. I want to try to fix this." "There's nothing to fix. You made your choice." "It wasn't a choice. It was a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake that I regret more than anything I've ever done." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our quiet street. "You know what I regret? I regret wasting 15 years on someone who thought so little of me that she could laugh when another man said I didn't deserve her. I never thought—" "Yes, you did. You thought I was weak. You thought I was mediocre. You thought I was so pathetic that I'd never figure out what you were doing, and even if I did, I'd be too spineless to do anything about it." "That's not true." I turned around to face her. "Isn't it? When Julian called me your roommate, you didn't correct him. When he said I barely counted as a man, you agreed. When Vanessa publicly humiliated me at your office party, you laughed along. I was trying to fit in. No, you were showing your true feelings. You were embarrassed by me, ashamed of me. You wanted to be with someone successful and powerful and impressive, and I was just the boring husband who paid the bills and mowed the lawn and loved you unconditionally." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "Alex, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know you are. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry Julian turned out to be just another cheating asshole who was using you. You're sorry your perfect plan to have your cake and eat it too fell apart." I sat back down, picking up my book. "But you're not sorry you hurt me. You're not sorry you lied to me for months. You're not sorry you made me feel like I was crazy for suspecting what was obviously happening. That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed, and it was a sound I didn't recognize. "Lena, you want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I spent months wondering what was wrong with me, why my wife suddenly found me so repulsive? Is it fair that I blamed myself for our marriage falling apart while you were screwing your boss? Is it fair that you turned me into a joke at your office parties while playing the devoted wife at home? I never meant for any of this to happen." "Yes, you did. Maybe not the getting caught part, but everything else. You meant it. You chose Julian over me every single day for months. You chose to lie to me every single night when you came home late. You chose to humiliate me in public while pretending to love me in private." I stood up again, and this time I walked over to where she was standing. She looked up at me hopefully, like maybe I was finally going to comfort her, forgive her, tell her we could work it out. Instead, I handed her an envelope. "What's this?" "Divorce papers. I've already signed them. I'm keeping the house. It's in my name, and I can afford the payments on my own. You can have your car, your clothes, and half of whatever's left in our savings account after I paid the lawyer." Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. "Alex, please, don't do this. We can go to counseling. We can work through this." "There's nothing to work through. You killed our marriage, Lena. You killed it slowly over months with every lie and every betrayal and every moment you chose him over me." I walked back to my chair. "I'm just burying the body." "I love you." "No, you don't. You love the idea of me, the steady, reliable husband who provides financial security and social respectability while you pursue more exciting options. I picked up my book again. But you don't love me. If you loved me, you never could have done what you did. Alex. Sign the papers, Lena. Take what's yours and go. Don't make this harder than it has to be. She stood there for several minutes, tears streaming down her face, clutching the divorce papers like they might disappear if she held them tight enough. I know you hate me, she said finally. And I deserve that. But I need you to know that losing you is the biggest mistake of my life. I don't hate you, I said honestly. I just don't care about you anymore. You made sure of that. What's going to happen to us? There is no us anymore. There's you and there's me, and we're going to live separate lives. You'll find another job, probably in another city, and eventually you'll find another man to cheat on. I'll finish raising myself back up from what you tried to turn me into. And Julian? Julian's finished. His career, his marriage, his reputation, all destroyed. He'll probably end up selling insurance in some small town where nobody knows his name. I looked at her directly. You picked a loser, Lena. A weak, pathetic loser who couldn't even protect himself, let alone you. I thought he was strong. He was just loud. There's a difference. I opened my book again. Real strength doesn't need to announce itself. It just acts when the time is right. Lena walked slowly toward the front door, then stopped and turned back. For what it's worth, Alex, you're not mediocre. You never were. I was just too stupid and selfish to see what I had. I know, I said without looking up. That's why you lost it. After she left, I sat in the quiet house for a long time, thinking about the past few days. A week ago, I'd been the weak husband, the mediocre roommate, the man who didn't deserve his beautiful wife. Today, I was the man who'd systematically destroyed two people who'd underestimated him. Tomorrow, I'd be the man who started building something new. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Heard Lena came by. You okay? I typed back, better than okay. I'm free. And for the first time in years, that was absolutely true. The weak husband was dead. The man who'd replaced him was just getting started. As I sat in my quiet house, surrounded by the remnants of a marriage that had died long before I'd buried it, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not happiness, exactly. Not yet. But the deep, satisfying peace that came from seeing justice served, from watching people get exactly what they deserved, from proving that actions have consequences and that underestimating someone is the most dangerous mistake you can make. Lena and Julian had learned that lesson the hard way, and I'd been the one to teach it to them.